establishment of middle schools is widely recognized as a grassroots movement with numerous leaders and advocates, including public school educators. 5 people are widely regarded as founders of the American middle school. These men, William Alexander, Donald Eichhorn, John Lounsbury, Gordon Vars, and Conrad Toepfer, are all widely respected curriculum experts who took up the cause of middle school education and provided leadership for the now decades-long effort to provide all young adolescents with the opportunity to attend schools based on their unique needs and interests. These founders have worked throughout their careers to advocate for effective middle schools and mentored their students and colleagues, many of which are now national leaders in middle-level education. All the founders have made rich contributions to the middle school knowledge base and have provided distinguished leadership to middle school education in numerous other ways. The founders have received numerous prestigious awards and other recognitions for their work. Middle-level education is forever indebted to them for their leadership and lifelong efforts on behalf of young adolescents and those who teach them and serve them in other ways.
Because of his pioneering work in the conceptualization and establishment of the middle school, Dr. William Bill M. Alexander is widely recognized as the father of the middle school. He proposed the creation of middle school in 1963 and conducted the first comprehensive national study of middle schools in 1968. Dr. Alexander's visionary research effort provided the baseline for subsequent studies of the implementation of middle school organization that provided a critical measure of the growth and implementation of programs and practices in middle schools for over 4 decades. Donald Eichhorn is widely regarded as one of the founders of middle school education. Unlike the other 4 founders of the middle school, who were professors when they did most of their middle school work, Donald Eichhorn spent his entire career in the public schools as a teacher and administrator. He made numerous contributions to middle school literature, including writing the first middle school book titled The Middle School, published in 1966. This influential and pioneering book was one of the publications that helped launch and sustain the middle school movement. He also made numerous presentations at professional conferences and in other venues where he could teach about and advocate for developmentally responsive middle schools. Dr. Eichorn worked closely with the other 4 founders of the middle school in efforts to spread the word about the importance of the creation of developmentally responsive middle schools. An additional contribution of Dr. Eichorn was his leadership in establishing model middle schools in Upper St. Clair, Pennsylvania. These schools were visited by educators from around the nation and world. Dr. Eichorn was a modest man and quiet leader who received many awards during his career, including the highest award given by the Association for Middle-Level Education, the John H. Lounsbury Distinguished Service Award.
Throughout his long and distinguished career, John Lounsbury has been a constant, committed advocate for young adolescents, as well as for those who teach them and serve them in other ways. His leadership in middle-level education spans a period of more than 60 years and includes exemplary teaching, mentoring, leadership, writing, editing, research, and professional service. He has significantly influenced the nature of contemporary middle-level education. Because of his special contributions, values, and integrity, he has been referred to as the conscience of the middle school.
There were other factors that entered into the junior high school movement that made it a success. One was the economic factor. Some of you who are younger may not realize that back then students were flunked regularly, constantly, and you would go into a 5th grade classroom and almost half the class might well be repeating that grade. That was common. And they began to look at the expense of having children repeat grades. And where were they repeating the grades most was often in the 7th and 8th grade. So that was a factor. Because I really care about it, I believe in it, I'm passionate about it, I genuinely love these kids, this age level. They're just wonderful to be with, and it's a pleasure to be around them. And I hate to see them get the short end of it, as they often do in schools that really don't recognize what wonderful learners they are, how energetic and creative, and how ready to go they are if you just give them a chance. I found that in teaching high school seniors, they were so blasé, you know, yeah, they'd been there, done that, you know, they really didn't, but middle school kids, something about them, just good. One of the interesting things is that our language contains no word for this level. You're either an infant, a child, an adolescent, or adult. But the most critical stage of all is that period between childhood and adolescence. And we didn't have a term for it. We said early adolescence, late childhood, emerging adolescent. We created terms, tweeners. Don Eichhorn created the word transcendent to give an identity to this special age group. And yet now that child development specialists have worked on it and appreciated it, it's really pretty obvious that it is, in fact, the most critical developmental period of all, the greatest period of change. Infants grow as much physically, but infants don't grow socially and intellectually as young adolescents. So no other age level has greater change accompanying it than does the period between the years 10 to 15. Fascinating age. And the age that, and this is a major belief of mine, that also is a reason I think middle school is so important. It is while they are in the 7th and 8th grade, they decide who they are, what they believe, what their standards are, what their values are, what they might aspire to be. You don't change people much in high school. You really don't. You add to, you refine, but in terms of basic personality, basic values, this is the age level. And it always bothers me that the high school is seen as the great capstone, the great educational enterprise. You have to have a new building for it, and the building that wasn't good enough for the high school was good enough then for the junior high school or the middle school. When in fact, in terms of having effect on one's life, no other age level can equal what happens in the middle level. And I guess I want to go back and bring up this historical concept. Van Til and Armstrong were progressive educators. No question about it. They were identified with William Herd Kilpatrick, John Dewey, George Counts, all those others who were the giants as progressive educators in the 1920s and 30s and into the 40s. And as I studied progressive education as a graduate student at Peabody, I became a progressive educator. And it seems to me that the middle school is the rebirth of progressive education. You know, progressive education was supposed to have been dead and buried. And you remember that book by Lawrence Kremen that talked about the death of progressive. It never died. The concept never died. Because progressive education, like middle-level education, is based exclusively on what do we know about kids, and what do we know about learning, and what is our society expecting of its schools. Those foundations are the same. Progressive education, middle-level education, same thing. Basing educational experiences on what we know about learning and society and the nature of kids. They're the enduring triangle, the enduring foundations, and they're always present. Now you say, well, aren't all schools based on those foundations? The fact of the matter is, and this is a rather radical statement, there is not a single general practice in the way we conduct public education that matches what we know about learning and kids. The whole concept of periods, time frame. There's no research to show that is the right time frame, 47 to 50 minutes. There is no research to show that the right size for a learning class is 25 to 30, none whatsoever. There is no research to show that the best way to present the world to young people is by studying separate subjects. No basis. So all of the basic organizational practices of public education are there only because we've always done it that way. They are not based on psychology, pedagogy, sociology, or anything else. It's hard to realize that. People aren't willing to face that. That's why I keep saying what we've got to do is quit trying to make schools as they are better and to make them different. Because we keep trying to make them better as they are. Add a subject here, bring in this, change that, but still keep the basic idea of subjects, classes, and periods. And they are not the best ways to organize education. The middle school movement provided a home base for people who had been concerned about education, for progressive educators who wanted to be progressive, for those that would try to do a better job, and so immediately flocked to the movement because it provided a gathering place for us. People who were progressive didn't have anybody to associate with or to organize with. And the middle school movement, the National Middle School Association especially, it gave a place for us to gather. And when you went to one of the early national conferences, you sensed it. Even still, there is a religious fervor about National Middle School Association conferences because these are people who really care about kids and are committed. And it's interesting to note how exhibitors will comment how much they prefer to exhibit at the middle school conference than any of the others, because the people there are wanting to know about the information, wanting to get information, find out about newer practices. They stop and look. I think it became the gathering place for progressives who didn't know they were progressive educators, but people who realized that what they were doing in their schools wasn't really all that it should be and could be. But I think basically the middle school movement is progressive education in contemporary dress, always trying to organize education in ways that match what we know about kids and learning.
The contributions that Conrad F. Toepfer Jr. has made to middle-level education are manifold and profound. He is a distinguished scholar, visionary educator, and longtime proponent of middle-level programs, practices, and schools that recognize and respect the rights and educational welfare of young adolescents. He is a staunch advocate of social justice, children's rights, and all aspects of authentic middle-level curriculum reform. Since the inception of the middle school idea, Toepfer has been a powerful voice for human rights and the need to help young adolescents develop enduring positive attitudes about themselves and others. Human rights, equity, and democracy are themes that prevail throughout Dr. Toepfer's life and career. He believes that one of the most important central challenges to middle-level education is educating moral citizens who can responsibly participate in a democratic society.
My credo has been simply that if education is going to succeed, it must allow youngsters to learn as fast as they can or as slow as they must. And I have two paradigms which I pushed to build that point for years. It, of course, champions the notion of ungraded schools, that youngsters can go forth at their own rate. Not all have the same test at the end of fourth grade in a common subject matter area, or in 8th grade, 12th grade as we have in the standards now. But I've said this, when you go to a Boston Marathon race, let's say, thousands of people watching it, and they watch until the runners have all finished. And then there's a group of people that remain until the people who are running the race in wheelchairs get across. The idea is to get there, accomplishing the goal. The same thing if you had an automobile distance race and you had a Honda Civic against a NASCAR vehicle. Both cars could do the 500 miles. The Honda Civic's going to take a little longer. And the youngsters who have not been blessed with all that the brightest kids have been are being shortchanged by our present situation, in my judgment. Kids in the middle level are really cut askew because we found out they can't do certain things by 4th grade according to these blasted tests. We can't deal with them responsibly because we have to start at a level. We keep trying to push them along. And I think it's dooming this generation of youngsters to failure in terms of the essential skills that this 21st century is going to demand. They can't all get there at the same time. It's an impossibility. But, of course, the kinds of things that I was concerned about have sort of fallen for favor. And while they may cycle back, they're not going to cycle back in the foreseeable future. We won't know 40 years from now whether the kid took 1, 2, or 3 years longer to complete school. We will know if they didn't develop literacy, mathematical literacy, scientific skills, or of course, and today, the citizenship skills to be a good citizen. We'll know that for their lifetime, and they'll know for it. Their quality of life, their horizon will be severely reduced by that. Those things were all ideas that were given some credence. Were they fully accepted? No. A lot of them were objective, but at least we're willing to think about them and try them. We found some marvelous pockets of success that this happened. You can still go back and look at that success today. It's recorded in the accounts of the school success. And you can ask, why do we change this? Oh, you really can't say why, because politically it didn't seem to be good. It wasn't, quote, tough enough, unquote. But the kids did very well. That attitude's not here today. The old attitude was, let's try it. We're not doing a lobotomy or anything like that. If it doesn't work, we can always come back and pick it up. But different time, different era, different planet, perhaps. It was such a hopeful time. It was such a time of believing as willingness to believe that something could be better, and it didn't have to be something that was prescribed from the top down. It was from the bottom up. That was a whole notion of developmental education. That was one of the great things that John Lounsbury continues to contribute to this day. It caused, at its time, a belief. It caused parents, it caused communities to believe that young adolescents were different and to support this stuff. And if we look at the years from about 1975 through about 1985, you talk to parents about middle schools, among young middle-level school students. If they had kids in that age group who were going to schools, they knew what it was about. They understood it, and they championed it. And so it did make a grassroots impact.
Dr. Gordon Vars has been a middle-level education leader throughout his long and distinguished career. A widely acclaimed expert and an articulate spokesperson for core curriculum, Dr. Vars has provided counsel and leadership for many seminal events in middle-level education. He was involved in the creation of the Midwest Middle School Association and in its later conversion in 1973 into the National Middle School Association. He served as the first president of National Middle School Association, was one of the authors of the first edition of This We Believe, and was on the Professional Preparation Advisory Board that wrote the first national standards for middle-level teacher preparation. Vars is the author of a great many middle-level articles, research reports, and books, and he has been a frequent presenter at professional conferences.
My emphasis, or even my contribution to this middle-level education movement is, number one, I have bought and continue to advocate, number one, this middle-level education has to be designed in such a way that it responds to the unique characteristics, needs, and concerns of young people going through this critical stage in life. If it doesn't do that, it's not good for them. At the same time, as Dr. Van Til so eloquently argued, we must be aware of what society expects of these young people. Nowadays, what society demands, test scores and all of that stuff, which is a disaster coming. And at the same time, not ignore, but be fully sensitive to developments in the various disciplines of knowledge. Because if we relate well to the kids, if we meet the expectations and demands of society, but do it with content that is incorrect, inaccurate, which a lot of it is, then again, we are not being true to the expectations of an educator. So it's got to be a balanced, integrated inclusion of nature of the learner, nature of society, and the nature of knowledge. Three foundations of curriculum that William Van Til taught. Number one, as everybody realized, and that was dramatically demonstrated in the Turning Points first document, 1989, this is a critical age. Kids make decisions, ages 10 to 15, that lead to death and destruction, a horrible life, or to a relatively safe life. And if we don't do a good job at this age, we're losing a generation. And so I think it was my recognition, dawned on me slowly, I'm sure, that this is maybe the most important period in a human being's life, other than the first few years when you're just trying to stay alive. So that would be my major motivation, I think. Major obstacle, of course, is the high-stakes testing. Not the standards. The standards are wise and appropriate if they're applied wisely and appropriately. But the punitiveness and the deliberate setting goals that are impossible for educators to meet is, I think, the cause of the disaster that is coming. We are lobotomizing a generation or two of kids by the emphasis on testing, memory work, regurgitation. Well, I don't think you should be asking the most. If you had to be most, it would be the kids. Those who were fortunate enough to have a decent middle-level education are benefited far beyond anything that the cost of preparing teachers and so forth. And, of course, I think the teachers, because some of the conflict between teachers and students is because they're talking past each other. They don't understand each other. Kids don't understand teachers, teachers don't understand kids. And so the kids can benefit, teachers benefit, and then the parents benefit, because parents are in conflict with their kids many times. Who's benefited the least, and I think that we need to address, and that is, it's the people in the poor districts, all people. They're the ones who suffer, not from the movement, but because the movement doesn't get to them. The movement is curriculum and instruction. If it is viewed as just organizational, then it ain't middle-level education. Forgive the language, okay? They're two sides of the same coin. Organizational structure and all of that should serve the curriculum, and the curriculum should serve the students.